Welcome everyone to our Packers News Camp Chat alongside Tom Silverstein. I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers ditched their pads today and put their shorts on for more of a walkthrough during practice today. We'll let you know why head coach Matt LaFleur decided to do that in just a moment. Before we get into that, I want to remind you, you can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, leave us a comment, leave us a question. We will get to some of those toward the end of our conversation today. Before we talk about what happened at the Packers practice, I want to discuss what happened directly after. Following practice today, head coach Matt LaFleur and the Packers Leadership Council met to discuss the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin last night. Both LaFleur and quarterback Aaron Rodgers voiced their frustration while talking with the media today about another act of police brutality toward a black man, just as they had after the death of George Floyd in a team-issued video. Tom, what came out of that meeting today?
Well, I think it was a lot of raw emotion, and at least from what they told us, they didn't give us a lot about what happened there, but I think they've been discussing ways to show and support the social justice movement. And I asked Rodgers whether they have something planned for the season opener, before. And he said they're still working on it, and I'm sure this will have some impact. And I don't know that we've seen all the reaction that we're going to see. The players, it happened Sunday. Players are pretty much in meetings all day and practice. And I think as time goes on, we'll probably see more reactions than we have. It was sort of limited, and it would have been great to hear that be in that council meeting. I'm sure there was a lot of really frank discussion.
Those conversations have been happening since George Floyd's death, and they will continue to happen going forward as we approach the regular season, especially regarding what action the team plans to take in getting themselves involved with issues related to racial injustices. Let's discuss exactly what happened today in Packers practice. As I mentioned at the top of the show, the Packers were not padded today. They were just in shorts and their jerseys for practice. This is on the heels of a very intense practice yesterday that included a 2-minute drill and some live tackling for some of the less experienced players. Tom, what was head coach Matt LaFleur's goal today with a little bit of a lighter practice?
I think it was in preparation for the practice inside Lambeau Field tomorrow. I think they had, as you mentioned, a very physical practice on Monday, and I suspect he wanted to do a little bit more of mental practice than physical, and then I'm sure he'll turn the heat up Tuesday, and then they'll have Wednesday off. So I expect that practice to be substantial inside Lambeau Field.
Getting back inside of Lambeau Field should be lots of crowd noise. In today's practice, the Packers welcomed back a couple of faces that had been dealing with some injuries. Those particular players were cornerbacks Jair Alexander and outside linebacker Za'Darius Smith. However, they did not welcome everybody back who has been dealing with injuries over the last several days. The Packers did not see safety Raven Green, offensive lineman Rick Wagner, or defensive lineman Montravius Adams participate in practice today. Both Wagner and Adams have now been out for a substantial period of time. Wagner since Thursday and Adams since Wednesday of last week. Tom, what are the implications for both Adams and Wagner because they've missed about 3 to 4 practices now?
Yeah, it's not good. Really as a whole, they have avoided injury in a big way. Now, it's part of it is because they haven't played any games, and but if you consider who's been out and how long, it's pretty minor. Wagner probably, Wagner and Adams both, are suffering as a result. But the Packers know what Rick Wagner can do. He's got a long resume. If they probably learned enough during the practices he did take part in. Montravius Adams needs to be on the field, and based on what I've seen, he had the boot on the other day, and he's still limping. I don't think he's going to be on the field for a while.
Not great news yet for Adams and Wagner. We will continue to monitor their status as the Packers continue to practice this week, as Tom mentioned, tomorrow inside of Lambeau Field. Let's move into some COVID-19 updates. Kicker Mason Crosby spoke with the media today, and he confirmed that prior to camp starting, during the intake portion of training camp, he tested positive for COVID-19. He said that his symptoms were mostly mild. He was able to go through the 10-day protocol without having many symptoms, many issues, and now he's back out on the practice field. Tom, how has Crosby acclimated himself back into practice?
Yeah, it's almost like he picked up right where he left off at the end of last season. I mean, his first day back, they kicked him 9 times, I think, and he hit like 8 of them. Then he went in the stadium and I think hit all 5 there, and then he hit all 8 yesterday. So if there's one guy they don't have to worry about, it's him. The illness, the virus did not affect his kicking, and I think he's just been in really good shape. He seems like the older he gets, the better shape he gets in, and he's kicking them straight.
Mason Crosby aging like a fine wine. At least his leg is out there on the practice field. Both he and Hunter Bradley were both on the COVID-19 list. They're now off. All 5 of the players that initially were on that list during the intake portion of camp have now come off. Really good news to see that all these players are healthy so far through camp. Let's move on to some of your questions over on Facebook. We'll start with Lindsay today. This is a question that Pete and I got yesterday, Tom. I'll throw this one at you as well. Mm-hmm. Lindsay asks, any indication that the Packers have any interest in recently released Ravens superstar, these are Lindsay's words, not mine, safety Earl Thomas, released by the Baltimore Ravens just a couple days ago. How interested might the Packers be in the safety?
0. They don't want to bring someone in the locker room who's going to cause some problems. They feel they have a really good locker room. They have a good young safeties. I mean, Adrian Amos is their oldest safety, and he's 27 years old. So they got Darnell Savage. They really like what Will Redmond brings to the game. They've got Raven Green. I don't see that happening.
All right, there's the verdict from Tom. No interest, or at least Tom doesn't predict the Packers having any interest in safety Earl Thomas.
If I said it, Brian Gutekunst believes that what we say is really important, so I think he'll probably take my advice.
This is true. Very good points there from Tom Silverstein. Let's go over to Ivan now. Ivan asks, so many things said about the offense and defense so far, but what is to be expected out of the Packers special teams unit? This is a good question. It's something that we haven't discussed much in the past. There's a good deal of consistency with this Packers special team unit, at least in some of these specialist positions, whether it's at kick return, punt returner. Tyler Ervin is back for yet another season after faring pretty well last season, a late season addition for the Packers at the return position. The Packers are also bringing back, who was supposed to be a free agent in Mason Crosby. He is now back with the Packers for another season. Both punter, J.K. Scott, Hunter Bradley, long snapper, are still with the team. What potential does the Packers special team unit have this season under Sean Menenga?
Well, they'll be missing some guys, but they're going to have a pretty good chunk of their foundation back. And then they'll be able to throw some young, fast guys on there, maybe Kamal Martin or Vernon Scott if he makes the team. I think they'll be probably as good as Sean Menenga's scheme takes them. He was very conservative last year, but he inherited a team that was just penalty-ridden, and he cleaned that up. He did a really nice job, but they were very vanilla, and they didn't go after many blocks. They didn't fake anything. I think this year he's got to take a few more chances, and if he does, I think they got the players to do it. It's just how quickly our special teams going to be able to come together with such little time. You're talking about cut downs. All of a sudden, guys you were using might not be with you, and special teams is going to be a little bit weird in the beginning, I think.
It's going to be a balance for Sean Menenga and his unit when it comes to balancing both being aggressive with not wanting to commit as many penalties. We'll see exactly how they pull that off when we get closer to the start of the regular season. Let's move over to Tommy. Tommy says it's EQ time, meaning it is wide receiver Etopia St Brown time. St Brown spent the majority of last season. In fact, he spent all of the regular season on IR with an ankle injury. He confirmed yesterday with the media that it was a high ankle sprain that plagued him. What potential does he have in 2020 coming off of essentially playing no football in 2019?
Well, he's got to show that he doesn't have any latent problems with it. From what I've seen, he looks like he's pretty quick off the line of scrimmage. He's just rusty, and I think that's going to be true for anybody who hasn't played for a year, and the guy hasn't played a game. Right now, not a lot of people are standing out at wide receiver, and so he's right in the mix. I would say it's Devontae Adams and MVS are the top two, and then after that, Alan Lazard has been just okay, and I think it's wide open. So he has every chance in the world to make the team.
If you're a Packers wide receiver and you can make an impact on this offense, make some splash plays, there is an opportunity out there for you. We will see if Etopia St Brown can rise to that opportunity this season. Let's move over to Matthew. Matthew asks, what can the Packers do for running back Jamal Williams? Is he playing behind running back A.J. Dillon? The Packers drafted Dillon in the second round of the draft, which was certainly interesting given the fact that they have a pretty strong running backs duo in Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams back in 2019. I suppose it isn't so much of an eyebrow raiser because both of those players become free agents in 2021. How has A.J. Dillon been faring so far in camp?
Well, they've given him a lot of looks, and he's been impressive. He's physical. He can hit the hole. He's got some speed. I do want to see him in pads, some more. I saw one run. He was in that group that was allowed to tackle, and he had a one-on-one on a cornerback. And while he did stiff arm him and get a couple extra more yards, he couldn't, I thought if he broke that tackle, he was gone. And it was Ento, who's as skinny as a rail. So that is yet to be seen, whether he can put that size to use and break tackles the way Eddie Lacy used to. There's a certain skill and balance, things like that you need as a big man. And that's the stuff we haven't seen yet.
It's a challenge to evaluate all of the quarterbacks during training camp when there isn't any live tackling in these periods. Hopefully, if head coach Matt LaFleur does decide to institute some of those live tackling periods for the veteran players, then we'll have a better sense of how A.J. Dillon is faring against some of the top defenders on this Packers defense. Let's move over to Jason. Jason says that he's still concerned about the Packers secondary. Giving up 285 yards on the ground is not acceptable. I'm assuming you're referring to the NFC Championship game there. Any news on how Mike Pettine, defensive coordinator, will change or adjust the defense? What is head coach Mike Pettine's plan, Tom, heading into the third year under his defense?
He said there's been some tweaks, but he's not doing any wholesale changes. I guess, he's got a scheme, and he's won with it or had some pretty good defenses with it. And I don't think one game is going to change him. I think that's just a fact of life. I'm sure Matt LaFleur talked to him about being a little bit more rundown conscious. And I think what it'll come down to is not so much the scheme, but the personnel. Is he willing to keep 3 defensive linemen on the field? or 2 defensive linemen, or 2 linebackers instead of a linebacker and a safety. I think those are the things that are going to determine what they do. You know, Rashawn Gary has showed that he has really improved his strength. I can see it in the one-on-one pass rush, just a lot of things you can see. I saw him throw down Robert Tonyan like he was a rag doll. And so I think that could be part of their plan, is get him on the field more, maybe with the 2 outside linebackers, and as sort of a inside defensive end, I guess. Maybe that's one thing they do. Maybe they just play with 2 linebackers more. That could be something we'll see as well.
Speaking of the linebackers, we have a question here from Mike. Mike asks, which is the biggest battle so far, I guess, of these 2 positions? Is it the running backs or the inside linebackers? Especially when it comes to the inside linebackers, Tom, we've discussed the running backs a little bit in this live stream. With the inside linebackers, the clear number 1 at the moment is Christian Kirksey, who the Packers picked up as a free agent this offseason. It came off the heels of the departure of inside linebacker Blake Martinez, who's now with the New York Giants. With Kirksey as the likely number 1, next to him, who's going to be the starter in the Packers base defense is the next big question for the Packers to answer. Where do they stand right now with that competition?
Well, they know a lot about Oren Burks. They don't know as much about Kamal Martin, and they're giving Kamal Martin a lot of reps. I think they want to see whether he's ready to play. Could they play him if they decide he's the best of the 3? I think that's what they're going through now. I think Ty Summers they know a lot about. They had him for a year. So Martin is the guy that they need to get information on. And so it is a race. I mean, it could go any way. They drafted Kamal Martin for a reason. And, you know, if they were completely satisfied, I don't know that they would have taken him. So I think it'll be right up to the game time.
Opportunities abound for the inside linebackers this training camp to see who has starting potential in this defense. Let's move over to a question here from Jason yet again. Jason asks, which wide receiver is looking closer to being that number 2? Allen Lazard emerged as the number 2 last season. About a quarter or a third of the way through the season, he became someone that Aaron Rodgers could rely more on, especially on 3rd down. How does Lazard look as the potential number 2 so far this training camp?
I haven't seen anything special from him. I think he's been solid. I've seen him have some mix-ups with Rodgers that didn't seem like they were around last year. Maybe we just didn't know about them. I think MVS is moving up the charts fast. And he's put 2 practices together. If he can, you know, I think the practice Tuesday in the stadium will be big for him. If he puts another good one together, then I think he's probably pretty close to getting to the number 2. But he's got to keep it going. 1, 2, 3 practices are good. 8, 10 practices are better. So that's kind of what he has to keep doing.
The cliche of training camp so far has been stacking practices, that the key for players like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, cornerback Josh Jackson, if they want to be able to make an impact on the Packers this upcoming season, they need to stack practices right now. I'm sure it is not the last time we will hear that phrase, and it truly is a relevant phrase for some of the less proven players that still have potential to make an impact. That's going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you're checking out PackersNews.com for all of your Packers news, aptly named. Also, make sure you're checking out our social media account for lots of updates throughout training camp. The Packers will be back on Lambeau Field tomorrow for yet another practice. We will have all the information for you tomorrow. We'll have another live stream as well following tomorrow's practice around the same time. So if we didn't get to your question today, bring it once more and we will get to it.